One of the difficult things for me with the Matmonim is not knowing who's listening. Baruch Hashem, hundreds and hundreds of people around the world listening and not having a connection. We talked yesterday and the day before about the importance of connection, and technology disconnects. It enables transaction without connection. Until the time of technology, you had to connect if you wanted to transact. Now one can transact even on something as meaningful as learning Torah together without connecting. So the absence of connecting with all the hundreds of people who are not sitting here in the Beis HaMedrash is one of the hard things of the Matmonim. So I do appeal to those of you online, once again, there's an opportunity simply by taking a moment to go onto the website that I've mentioned to you, onto the webpage, matmonimcelebration.com, and just let me know that you're listening. Just tell me who you are and that you're listening. It makes such a difference to me. I've spent a lot of hours, as you know, preparing and giving just about 1,000 shiurim, Matmonim shiurim so far for you. And all I'm asking for you to do is to take a few moments and to go online and to click online and to just say, hello, I'm here, this is me, I listen, I'm part of that community. That would make a very big difference to me. So please do take the opportunity to go to matmonimcelebration.com, and it'll take you a moment just to give us your name and let me know that you're there. The effectiveness of an action when we do something depends on a number of different things. It depends on the action being done correctly. And not just with mitzvahs, with all actions. It depends on the intent with which the action is done, the kavanah. Kavanah is one of the dimensions of effectiveness of an action. But it also depends on whether or not you have the authority to do that particular thing. So if walking into the Beis HaMedrash this morning, Rael were to say to me, oh, look where you've parked, I'm going to give it today, I'm actually parked in a kosher place. And he would say, look where you parked, I'm going to give you a ticket. I say, good morning, Rael, hope you have a good day. And if he says, and I hope you have a terrible day when I give you a ticket, it doesn't bother me because Rael's not authorized to give tickets. But if Moshe Isaacson were to walk in and say, I'm going to give you a ticket, that's different. And if he says, and I hope you have a terrible day when I give you a ticket, that feels terrible. Why? Two people both learn in the Matmonim Shir, both saying the same thing. One affects me badly, one is completely ineffective altogether because Moshe has the authority to give a ticket and Rael doesn't. So we've got to always check our levels of authority and the level of the authority of a person doing something. The authority to act, מחשבה מועלת אלא במי שראוי לעבודה, זבachim daf chavav amud aleph. Let's see where we see this in Kodshim, in our Gemara. Amar Rava says, Ein מחשבה מועלת אלא במי שראוי לעבודה. Here you've got it. It's a halacha of Rava, and as we're going to see, it goes back earlier than Rava as well. We know that a מחשבה can be poselet. A מחשבה, a thought, can disqualify a service and even disqualify the entire korban. What particular thoughts? For example, we know the thought of chutz lizmano or chutz limkomo. If you perform that service with the intention of doing the next piece of the service, of eating the korban outside of its allocated place or time, that can damage, that can disqualify the entire korban. Everything else you've done right. You've done every piece of it right. The only thing is you had in mind a certain error, you had a mistake in your mind, that can damage the whole korban. But says Rava, that's only if the person performing that service, that particular avodah, is שראוי, is qualified to do so. Now the Rishonim go into the whole question of, well, if he's not qualified to do so, then there are other problems altogether. So leaving that aside, the Rishonim and the Achronim deal with that. But what we deal with here is just the statement of the din, that the machshava only has impact to damage and disqualify the action in a situation where the person performing that action is qualified to do so, which Rashi says means he's a kohen kasher. This person is a kosher kohen. He's a kohen, he has all the qualifications of a kohen, and he doesn't have any of the psulim of a kohen. He doesn't have a mum, he's not tameh. All of those things don't apply. But if a kohen who is pasul, let's say a kohen who has a mum, who has a physical imperfection, a physical blemish which disqualifies him from the avodah of kahuna, from performing priestly services, if such a kohen were to perform a service, an avodah in the Beis Hamikdash for a korban, and his mind is in the wrong place, that mind has no effect on the korban. As we said, there are other problems, but there's no pigul effect with that korban. And the Rambam paskins that la'alocha, and says in Psulei HaMukdoshim Daf Perik Yudalad Alocha Beis, ve'ein ha'machshava mo'elet ela mimi shehu ra'ui la'avodah. Machshava, thought, only has impact if the person thinking and acting is one who's authorized to do so. What does it mean that it has to be somebody who is fit? Somebody who's not allowed to serve receives the blood, or holicha, takes the blood to the mizbeach, or zarak, or sprinkles the blood on the mizbeach. V'chashav bishat avodah machshevet makom u'machshevet zman, and while doing so, he had the wrong thought about time and place. Lo pasal b'machshavto, his thought is ineffective. Not every thought counts. Some thoughts count, some thoughts don't count. Lefi she'eino ra'ui la'avodah, he's not fit. And therefore that blood which he did busy himself with, he received, he wasn't the right person to do so, but mistakenly he received the blood into this utensil, or he carried it, or whatever part of it he did, that has to be spilt at the foot of the mizbeach. And if there's still blood left over that he didn't deal with, that he didn't touch, a kosher kohen can go and finish the job, because the kohen hasn't, the korban hasn't been nifsal, the korban has not been disqualified. Just that activity doesn't count because he was pasul. But you say, but he disqualified the korban because of what was in his mind. We know that if a kohen does one of the avodot with the wrong thought, that disqualifies the entire korban. It's not resolvable. It can't be saved in any kind of a way. And here the Rambam says another kohen can go and continue the job. Yes, because his machshava is irrelevant. We don't consider his thought at all. But here's an interesting case. What happens if a kohen pasul? So he's got a mum, he's missing a hand or a leg, or he's tameh, or whatever the situation is, and he does shchita, he does the first avodah, he slaughters the animal. And in his mind, his thought is, I'm going to do the other things outside of the Beis Hamikdash, or outside of the right place. So he's got a wrong thought. So he's the wrong man with the wrong thought. Well, we've just said if you're the wrong man, it doesn't matter, but with shchita it does. Why? Pasal b'machshavto. When you do shchita, the thought counts even if you're pasul. Why? Shashchita kshera b'psulim, k'mo shebiarnu. Because you don't have to be a kohen kasher to do shchita. Anybody can do shchita. The Mishnah says a little bit further on Daf Lamed Aleph, Kol ha'psulim sheshachtu shchitatan kshera. Anybody who shechts an animal for the Beis Hamikdash, as long as he knows what he's doing, the physical specifications are observed. But he's not a qualified kohen, it doesn't matter for shchita. Shashchita kshera bezarim, because somebody who's not a kohen is allowed to slaughter. Uvenashim, a woman is allowed to slaughter. It's so interesting to me that shchita is a mitzvah. Certainly shchita in the Beis Hamikdash. I haven't heard of women's movements to have the right to slaughter. They want to put on tefillin, I understand. They want to daven before the Omud, I understand. They want to do kriyas. What about shchita? Become a shoichet. I haven't seen a women's movement of why are women excluded from shchita. But they're allowed to. That's one thing that they're allowed to do. Even if you bring a korban oilo, kodesh kedoshim, one of these psulim can do the shchita. As long as a kohen tamei doesn't touch the meat, that's a different problem. But the qualification doesn't have to be there. He just has to know what he's doing. He just has to know how, or she has to know how to shecht. But all the other qualifications of the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash don't apply. So that's a kula on the one hand. It's a lighter law on the one hand, that anybody can do the shchita, but with it comes a chumrah. If that anybody had the wrong thought, that thought will be effective in disqualifying the entire korban. That thought will be a proper pigul thought. Why? Because they're qualified to do that. The fact that they're not a kohen tameh doesn't interfere in that particular avodah of shchita. That avodah of slaughtering is an avodah which he's allowed to do. Since he's allowed to do, he's qualified. Since he's qualified, his machshava applies. And that's the Mishnah further on. Kol hapsulim sheshachtu shchitatan kshera. Lefichach, the Mishnah says this. Hein poslin b'machshava. And therefore, in the slaughtering avodah, in that first avodah, that first act of service, a mistaken thought by somebody who's not a kohen kosher, not a kosher kohen, his mistaken thought counts and it can destroy the korban because he's allowed to do so. Firstly, that the idea, why is that so? Rashi learns, we'll see the Rashi further on, Daf Lamed Beis. Rashi says that if you're not a qualified person, machshavtam ena machshava. If you're qualified, then your thought is a thought. If you're not qualified, then your thought is irrelevant. That's a very important principle to understand in life. If you're not qualified, your thought is irrelevant. What do you think about the peace process? You know what? I'm not qualified to comment. What I think about is actually irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. And yeah, I might have some thoughts, but they just don't make a difference. What do you think about what the so-and-so paskined in such and such a halacha? You know what? I'm not a posek. My opinion doesn't make a difference. To actually understand our limits of authority, when our thoughts are important and when they're not. And when somebody says, I think you were wrong in doing such a thing, you've got to ask yourself, does this person have the authority to tell me that he thinks I was wrong? If he does have the authority, I've got to take it seriously. If he doesn't have the authority, it's irrelevant. Because part of the relevance of an action or of a statement is dependent on having the authority to make the statement or to perform that action. And Rashi learns it out of the posuk in Vayikra, Amakrivo lo yechashev lo pigul yiyeh, the very source of the principles of thought averot in avodah, pigul. It says hamakrivoto, the one who is doing the temple service, meaning somebody who's qualified to do so. Rashi learns, but when somebody is not qualified, so when Rail wants to give me a ticket, I don't have to have a panic attack. It's irrelevant because he doesn't have authority. And the fact that he has bad intention, he wants me to have a bad day as well, is also irrelevant because bad intention is only relevant when it attaches to an action. Just an ordinary intention on its own is unimportant. It's interesting that's translated into the legal system in the United States. So in the United States, you're allowed to think whatever you want. Fine. Some countries where you're not, but in America, you're allowed to think whatever you want. Because of America's obsession with freedom of speech, you're even allowed to say whatever you want. Even if what you're saying is hateful, you're allowed to say it. But if you do something and one can prove that that action was motivated by hate, the sentence is much more severe. So when a bad intention attaches to an action, their legal system also recognizes that aggravates the action. But the bad intention without the action is worth zero. It's like the zeros in a number. Rabbi Lapin used to say that hevel hayofi, when it says sheker achen vehevel hayofi, if we say in Eishes Chayil, hevel means zero. That beauty in a woman is zero. And he used to say zero is nothing. And 10 zeros is still nothing. But when 10 zeros are attached to a 1, they mean a lot. And that's what Hevel HaYofi is. Beauty on its own is nothing. But if the person is beautiful inside and beautiful outside, then it means something. It's the same with Kavona. Kavona alone is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Kavona attached to an action means a fortune. And that action, so it's intention, it's action, intention, and authority to act. When those three merge, then you've got a powerful action. If any of those three are missing, the action loses its power. And why is it that for shechita, anybody can do it? Why is the authority so limited for the other avodot? Who can be mekabel? Who can be zorek? Who can be molich? That's so limited. Who can be to do the shechita? Anybody. Anybody can do the shechita. Why is it so unlimited with the shechita? That links back to what we learned in our Matmonim yesterday, where we learned on Daf Chafei that when it says V'lakacha kohen HaMashiach midam hapar, the Gemara says we use gorim and mesifrim v'dorshim, and that means dam mei hapar yekablenu, which the Sifra explained, the Gaon quoted it, min hapar yekabel. It's important that the receiver of the blood receives it from the bull. And we discussed yesterday that means the bull is the giver. And we talked about that connection. It's not just a transaction. It's not just a ritual. It's the bull giving his life blood, giving it to Avodas HaKodesh, giving it to sanctity. And the recipient, the Kohen, receives it in this beautiful kli sharet, in this beautiful utensil. He receives it from who? Says the Al Gemara, Dam par. You receive it from the par. The par is giving you something. Receive it from the par. When does the par give it to you? And how does the par give it to you? The par gives it to you through shchita. So shchita is not killing an animal. Shchita is facilitating a blood donation. Yes, it's taking his life, it's donating his total life. But the purpose of shchita in kodshim is not just to be matir the basar. It's not like shchita in chulin. In shchita in chulin, in normal law, when you go to the butcher and you buy some meat, it has to have been shechted. Why? The shchita makes the meat edible from a halachic perspective. It makes it kosher. That's what the shchita does. In shchita, you can now eat the meat. That's not what shchita does in kodshim. Shchita in kodshim is a completely different function. Shchita in kodshim is to facilitate the blood donation of the par. So the avoda is not actually the shchita. Who does the first avoda? This is a crazy thing to say in a way, isn't it? Who does the first avoda? The par. The par actually does the first avoda. No, a par can't do avoda. So a human has to facilitate it. But the person facilitating is not really doing the avoda. If he was doing the avoda, it would have to be a kohen kosher. It's the bull that's doing the avodah. You're making it possible. And that's why not only don't you have to be a kohen kosher, but we learned in the previous dapim, you don't even have to be standing in the place where the bull is. The bull has to be in the northern part of the Azorah. What happened? And for all the other avodot, you have to be there too. The kohen has to be there too. The Gemara discusses what happens with a kohen or a person who has a long knife, and he's standing below the center point. So he's in the southern part of the Azara, and he stretches over to the northern side of the Azara where the bull is standing, and he shechts the bull there. We say that's kosher, that's good, but the Kohen was standing in the southern part. Who cares where he was standing? Where was the bull? The bull's the one who does the avodah. The bull was in the tzofan. The bull was in the northern side. That's what counts. So we see this idea just developing so beautifully and understanding the role of shchita, of what shchita is, the role of Kabbalah, of what Kabbalah is, and how it comes together in the way one receives and in the way one gives in the situation of kodshim.